Hello, welcome to the season 5 finale of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo Malloy. So, the film that I will be closing off this season, I would say, is a great one. So, I will be talking about Jackie Brown. So, Jackie Brown is a 1997 crime film that's based on the novel Rum Punch by Elmore Leonard. It is written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, who's known for directing films such as Kill Bill and Django Unchained. The film stars Pam Grier, Samuel L. Jackson, and Robert Forster. Here is the synopsis. When flight attendant Jackie Brown, played by Pam Grier, is busted smuggling money for her arms dealer boss, Ordell Robbie, played by Samuel L. Jackson, Agent Ray Nicolette, played by Michael Keaton, and Detective Mark Dargis, played by Michael Bowen, want her help to bring down Robbie. Facing jail time for her silence or death for cooperation, Brown decides instead to double cross both parties and make off with the smuggled money. Meanwhile, she enlists the help of bondsman Max Cherry, played by Robert Forster, a man who loves her. So the film was released in theaters on December 25th, 1997. It had a budget of $12 million. In terms of box office, it made over $74.7 million worldwide. It opened at number 5 domestically with over $9.2 million. It was beaten by films including Titanic, Tomorrow Never Dies, and As Good as It Gets. In terms of critical reception, it has a 3.9 rating on Letterboxd. It was nominated an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Robert Forster. And at the time of this recording, it is available to stream on Hollywood Suite and Lionsgate Plus, and is available on demand, so check your local provider. All right, let's get into the first discovery. So, I remember growing up, I had the VHS tape of this growing up. So, I remember this was like my introduction to Quentin Tarantino. And I don't remember my initial thoughts on this movie, obviously, but I just remember like I like enjoyed this movie, mainly like for Pam Grier because I grew up watching her movies. I think before I've mentioned that I've watched a lot of black exploitation movies. I previously covered Black Mama, White Mama on the podcast, so check that episode out. I say it's a great movie with this one. I feel like in terms of Quentin Tarantino's filmography, it seems like this one is quite underrated because if you compare this to his previous movies, it is quite. You could say it's quite more tamer. Maybe you could argue because it's based off a novel, while his other movies are original works. So that could be partly why. But I think probably here just wanted to try something different while like offering like his usual flair, so to speak, as you would find in a lot of his work. And it shows, yeah, that he could do other things as opposed to doing similar types of work and all that stuff. And I would say for me, it's one of my favorite movies of all time for various reasons. So there is that. And yeah, it still holds up, I would say, with this movie. So let's get into the highlights. I find like the cast, I really enjoyed the cast of this movie. So we have, of course, Pam Grier as our titular character, Jackie Brown. I would say this role for her, like, it's a more, you could argue, like, mature side, but she still has fun with it, I would say, because her character, is scheming not just Ordell Robbie, but also too with the law enforcement. So she gets to show those different shades like to her character. And I would say like it's one of her best performances, I would say. And you could argue like with this role, it's an extension to her previous roles in the black exploitation era, like with Coffee or Foxy Brown, so to speak, but shows like how like the characters would live, I guess, when they're older, so to speak. And yeah, like with the themes of the movie, it explores, yeah, the idea of like, of starting over, reinventing yourself, but also too like with ageism, like mainly through Jackie, because her character is working for the worst airline essentially. It's all because of her criminal record, because she can't get work in any of the major airlines, and she has to do what she can really to get by, which resorts to her like working with Ordell to smuggle money inside the country. But yeah, like she essentially is trying to do like whatever it takes to survive essentially. And it was interesting, like her conversation with Max. This was after when Ordell paid her a visit late at night. She tells Max that it's scarier to start over because of her age, especially in the industry that she works in, because it's often, I imagine, younger employees working as flight attendants, not so much with older flight attendants. And yeah, because she worries that she may get fired essentially and has to start over. And especially at her age, like it's quite hard to start over, I think, for various reasons. But yeah, I enjoyed, yeah, Pam Grier in this movie, and it was quite unfortunate that she didn't get Oscar nominated. I'm sure she received other accolades, but in terms of Oscars at the time, she didn't get nominated for this, which is quite sad. But yeah, I would say it's one of her best performances to date. Also, to Samuel Jackson as Ordell Robbie. I think his character has some of the best lines. An example would be when he tells Max towards the end, "My ass may be dumb, but I ain't no dumbass." Or another one is, "You can't trust Melanie, but you can trust Melanie to be Melanie," which is so funny. And love how the character, he wears Kangol hats. Jackie wears a Kangol hat at one point when she's at the mall, but Ordell often wears the Kangol hats. It looks like a backwards a beret hat. I don't know the proper term for those hats, but they're cool hats with those ones. And I think Samuel Jackson often wears Kangol hats, so there is that. And his character has like this long, you could say, soul patch type beard, which is interesting with the long hair. Maybe to show that like his character is like, a cool guy essentially. but but I guess depending on which character's viewpoint, that is up for debate, particularly with Melanie with her thoughts on Ordell. So yeah, I thought Samuel Jackson, is no exception to his work, especially with Quentin Tarantino. He has collaborated with Tarantino multiple times at this point. So yeah, I would say it's up there in terms of Samuel Jackson performances. Also, too, I want to mention Robert Forster as Max Cherry. Now, prior to this movie, I was not familiar with the actor, but he did a great job, I find, where he's dealing with more on the cons side of working in the bail bonds business. He mentioned to Jackie at one point that he's thinking of leaving the business when he was waiting for someone at their house. That was when, I believe, was the night when he took Jackie home and found out she took his gun and all that stuff. But yeah, like even though he's dealing with the frustrations of his job, he has he shows his softer side when he's with Jackie. Like he's quite fond of her. I think when they first met outside of jail is when he was quite smitten with her with the song playing in the background that escapes me. But yeah, that was cute. And when he listens to the Delphonics with that song, "Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time?" Like he quite digs that song so much that he goes to the record store to buy the tape of it. And speaking of that scene, that reminds me, that kind of brought me back to old times, back when physical media was pertinent, like particularly like when, and at least in Canada, we used to have HMV and all that stuff. So yeah, it just made me miss like those old days. But yeah, and regardless of that, yeah, like his character is quite modest, I would say. Like particularly when he told Jackie that he only took 10% of the money. It shows that he's that he's not really all for the money, so to speak. But he was willing to help Jackie out because he had a fondness for her. So good on him. And I want to say there was a funny moment with him when he goes to Ordell's place to give him the money from the bail bonds. It's funny that like Ordell said, "Oh, this is it," when Ordell knows that he helped Jackie with the money. So I found that was a hilarious moment. Also, still want to highlight Bridget Fonda as Melanie. Now, I'm not really too familiar like with her. I know she played Nikita, and I think was in that movie Point of No Return. That's a remake to La Femme Nikita, and she was also in Kiss of the Dragon, the Jet Li movie. But yeah, I don't really know too much of her work outside of those. But I find here she did great. Her character is quite the pain in the ass, but it seems like Ordell is the only one that likes Melanie, even though Melanie doesn't like him. Because it's funny that Ordell refers to her as his blonde hair surfer girl. So funny, but it shows, yeah, that like with Melanie, she has like an attitude problem, because I think as Jackie pointed out that she's just pissed off that she's not part of Ordell's schemes, so to speak, because you see like the way that he treats her, like they have their back and forth essentially with her not wanting to answer the phone and not wanting to leave when he wanted her to leave even though it's her place. But yeah, her character is quite interesting to watch on screen, and the moment that she has with Lewis towards the end is quite fascinating. But I guess like what happens to her when Lewis kills her, it seemed like it was coming. She kept annoying him, and he was right on the edge at that point. And speaking of Lewis, Robert De Niro, I find this is a more quite reserved performance for the character because the character doesn't really say a lot. I think with Lewis, he just got out of jail. It seemed like he just wants to, lay low, essentially not get into trouble. But of course, like, when like the money exchange happens for real this time, as the title card points out, that's when we see a different side of Lewis. Obviously, Melanie is annoying him at that point when, he's forced to, drag her out of the house. And yeah, like it looked like he was about to snap at times, particularly when they were at Billingsley with that store. And but yeah, like I guess it shows like a different aspect to what Robert De Niro can do, because usually the types of characters that he plays, at least as far as I see up to that point, is quite like over the top, I would say. But at least here is a bit more reserved, so to speak, but in ways his character can be effective. And then yeah, Michael Keaton as Ray, he was quite fun to watch on screen. It's interesting. Like I do have a fun fact in regards to his character. I'm sure if you're aware, his character appeared in the Out of Sight movie. I'll bring that up in the trivia section, but that was quite fascinating. Also, too, I want to mention Chris Tucker as Beaumont. So his was more of a cameo, so to speak, and I find that it's quite different in comparison to the roles that he played at that point, particularly with the Rush Hour movies, because his character is quite loud in that movie. You could argue here his character is loud to an extent, but yeah, it's just too bad what happens to his character and the way that that is shot when his character's in the trunk, and it's funny that he had this back and forth with Ordell, not wanting to be in the trunk essentially. But it's just interesting the way that the scene is shot, where we see like a tracking shot that pans up, and then it stops to where Ordell parks a car at this like abandoned place that's not far, or at least seems that's not far from Beaumont's place. But yeah, that's quite interesting. And yeah, like good on Chris Tucker for being in the Quentin Tarantino movie. That must be fascinating. Also too, as highlight, there's a lot of moments I would say with this movie. I want to talk about the money exchange, the for real this time. It's interesting, yeah, that it shows the different POVs for that, because we first start with Jackie. From her vantage point, she buys like the new suit, a two-piece suit, which looked nice on her, by the way. And we see when she's in the changing room, Melanie's bare feet. I'll talk about the feet in the lowlights section, but then it's interesting at one point when she's rushing out the store, the camera follows her, and at one point it circles around her as she's frantically looking for Ray. So I found that was like a cool shot there too, while the some of the score from the Coffee movie plays in the background. So that's interesting there. And another POV we see next is from Melanie and Lewis. So clearly, as I've mentioned, Melanie, is a pain in the ass, annoying Lewis essentially at this point. Interesting that his hair is slit back, while before it was more loose, so to speak. And interesting that with Lewis, he notices Max at the store, but doesn't really say anything about it, because he probably didn't think anything of it until he brings it up in the conversation with Erdell inside the van. And yeah, it's just too bad that he shot Melanie at the parking lot, even though he probably had no choice, because she was annoying him essentially. But and also too, it's too bad what happens to him when Ordell shoots him. Now you could argue that Ordell shoots him because he brings up that Max was at the store, but I think also too because Ordell likes Melanie. He seems like he's the only character that likes Melanie, and because as he mentioned, even after her death, that she was his blonde haired surfer girl. So you could argue, yeah, there could be two possibilities of why he shot Lewis. So there's that. And then the final POV we see in this exchange is with Max. So he, of course, oversees what's happening. He sees what happens with Melanie and Louis inside the store, but also too with Jackie when she's interacting with the cashier. And yeah, and it's pretty easy peasy for Max, because he manages to get the bag of money that's covered in the beach towels. And it's interesting, yeah, that the music plays as he walks off. So there's that, easy peasy for Max. Also too, as a highlight, I enjoyed the final scene between Jackie and Max. It was quite bittersweet, because clearly there seemed to be fondness over each other. 'Cause I think Max probably loves Jackie more than Jackie loves Max, or you could argue it's equal. But I think we see more of Max, having affection for Jackie and all that stuff. But but yeah, it was quite bittersweet because she tells Max that she's leaving Spain. She's heading to Spain. She's going to see different parts of Spain, I believe. And she drives and she decides to use Ordell's car to get away. And it's interesting that Max brings up that it's weird to borrow a dead man's car. But I guess no one's going to claim it, so why not just take it? And I was Googling just before recording that apparently the car is a Mercedes Benz, a 1986 Mercedes Benz. I thought at first, maybe at glance, like, oh, it could be the GNX car, similar to the car that you see in the visuals for Kendrick Lamar's album GNX. But no, that's not the case. But hey, it would have been interesting if that was a GNX car. I mean, like, wow, it'll be like fascinating. But anyways, so yeah, with Jackie and Max, they kiss before she departs, and clearly he's upset because while he's taking a phone call, you know he's still processing like her leaving and all that stuff, and he had to hang up the phone early and all that stuff as he watches her leave. And then we see like the close up of Jackie's face inside the car. So she's clearly upset. Even though she has the money, it shows in a way that she's starting over. Maybe she's also sad because of that. It's unclear like if she's going to continue to be a flight attendant at that point, but I think it's clear that, because she's heading to a new country, she is starting over essentially, which scares her, which is, you could say, is partly why she's crying at that point. And it's also interesting too that with the song Across 110th Street by Bobby Womack plays, because that was played during the opening credits. And I love the way that was shot. We see like her side profile as she's like on an elevator. I found that's quite cool because apparently that Tarantino was influenced by The Graduate with the credits with that one. It is the inspiration for why he decides to use that for the opening credits, and then here for the closing is more of a close up of her face. I found that's interesting, and both music plays in the credits, so that's quite cool. And yeah, the visuals I would say are on point for a Tarantino movie. I wouldn't say like it's too flashy with the visuals here in comparison to his other works, but yeah, I would say it's no exception here. I enjoyed, I would say, when Ordell visits Jackie. This is right after when she comes from jail. He keeps turning off the lights. Do you think that, oh, he's gonna do something to her and doesn't want anyone to see? That's why he's wearing gloves essentially, because when we see him wear gloves for the first time is when he's about to kill Beaumont. Luckily, like, nothing happened at that point at Jackie's place. But then also too, we see there's no lights when he and Max head to Max's office to see Jackie. So I found that's quite interesting there too, and loved how like the lighting, you see like kind of like the shadows of the characters, and then after when Ray shoots Ordell, the lights finally come back on. So I found that's quite fascinating there with the parallels there, and I'm sure like there's like analysis you could art for those scenes. I guess with the darkness. Could illustrate that trouble is coming essentially. So there's that. And I enjoyed, yeah, there was a moment when we see the backside of Ordell and Lewis when they're inside the van. I found that was interesting shot because I think in that scene we see like a close up of Ordell's face as he's thinking, which zooms in up to a certain point. I thought that was cool. And yeah, it's just too bad what happens to Lewis at that moment. But, you know, it happens essentially. And another moment I would say is when Ordell is having conversation with Max about Beaumont. We see close up of Max telling Ordell about Beaumont's priors and all that stuff. I found that's interesting because I guess that's to show, yeah, that I guess Ordell's supposed to be surprised, but he's not really surprised because I guess he knew at that moment that he had to let Beaumont go permanently at that moment. So, yeah, I find the visuals are quite on point. They're not like flashy in comparison to what you see in Tarantino's movies, but yeah, they're not bad. And gee, there's so many moments with this movie. Because the other money exchange, the trial run, I find is quite fascinating to watch. When we see Sharonda, like for the first time, I find it's pretty clear there that, like, she's going through something. You could argue maybe she's nervous or maybe like she is on something. It's unclear, but it's interesting that Jackie has to tell her what to do because probably could be because she's nervous, or it could be one of those things where, like, she's forced to obey certain commands and all that stuff. So could be one or the other. Um, but yeah, interesting that Ordell with that moment was trying to double cross her, but he tells Jackie that is to protect his interests. And but it's no surprise though, after that trial run, that Simone, who we saw earlier was doing the performance for Lewis at her place, no surprise she runs off with the $10,000. We don't know much about her relationship with Ordell, but it's safe to say that probably she didn't like him either. So there is that. There's that. And what else? When Max leaves the movie theater, it kind of made me miss seeing theaters inside of malls. Now I'm sure like that's still around, but I feel like not so much these days. Lastly, I want to talk about the soundtrack. So yeah, the soundtrack is quite phenomenal. Like a few months ago, I purchased the soundtrack on iTunes, so I have that. So yeah, like I listen to the soundtrack every now and then. It may also too like makes me miss like because of soundtracks back in the day, particularly with Tarantino soundtracks, you'll have like parts of the dialogue or scenes as tracks essentially. I feel like that rarely happens these days with movie soundtracks, but yeah, just made me miss that aspect of it. But as the soundtrack itself is quite phenomenal. So as I mentioned, Across 110th Street by Bobby Womack. Of course, that's for both the opening and ending credits. But also too, we have Long Time Woman by Pam Grier. That's what plays when Jackie, is entering jail in the uniform essentially. And another moment, yeah, Street Life by Randy Crawford that plays when Jackie is arriving, heading to the mall for the money exchange for real. And also, too, there were songs that are not included in the official soundtrack, but there are in the movie. Example is we have parts of the score from the movie Coffee that plays during like the money exchange with that around the final act of the movie. And then Sissy Strut by the Meters, that's when Ordell and Lewis arrive at Max's office for the first time. So, yeah, phenomenal soundtrack. Of course, with Tarantino, he's very particular with his soundtrack. So I would say this one is no exception. All right, let's get into the lowlights. So, I wouldn't say it's a low light for me, but you could argue that with this movie is quite tame in comparison to Tarantino's other works because a lot of his previous movies are quite fast pace, quite balls to the walls with the action and all that stuff. Yeah, this one you could say it's more. You could argue it's a bit slow on that aspect, but I would say it's quite effective with the movie because you could say because it's based on a book, while his other stuff are original works. So there is that. Um, Also, too, as a low light, we need to talk about the feet. Now, this tends to happen in a lot of Tarantino movies, but yeah, here with the feet, we see a lot of Melanie's feet. Like we see her. I think like the introduction to her character, when the chicks with guns, when that video plays, which that I forgot to mention this for highlights, but chicks with guns, that's quite phenomenal to see with the women in bikini, um, uh, displaying and using these different machine guns. But yeah, I don't get why Tarantino loves feet. I just don't get it. It could be a fetish thing. Who knows? But yeah, if you've seen a Tarantino movie with feet, yeah, this one is no exception. But here, like Melanie, of course, is displays the feet essentially. And as a final low light, so when this is after when Ordell shoots Lewis, he's at another person's house because I thought originally that was Sharonda because we don't really clearly see who it is because the person is on the couch. But it turns out it's another person he knows named Raynell, who apparently is a junkie. It makes me wonder, like, first what happened to Sharona because we only see her at the mall during the trial run of the money exchange. But I guess what it doesn't matter at this point. So I don't know. Maybe like safe to say that maybe she got arrested during the real money exchange. I don't know. Plus, also too, I think it could have been clear when Ordell was at Raynell's house that the shot could have been more clear. But I guess maybe that was a creative choice with that one. All right, let's get into trivia. There's a lot of fun facts with this movie, so I'm not going to share every single one. So apparently, after completing Pulp Fiction, Tarantino and Roger Avery they acquired the film rights to Elmore Leonard's novels Rum Punch, Freaky Deaky, and Kill Shot. So Tarantino initially planned to film either Freaky Deaky or Kill Shot and have another director make Rum Punch, but changed his mind after rereading Rum Punch, saying he fell in love with the novel all over again. Kill Shot was later adapted into a film released in 2008, produced by Jackie Brown producer Lawrence Bender. Interesting. And while adapting Rum Punch into a screenplay, Tarantino changed the ethnicity of the main character from white to black, as well as renaming her from Burke to Brown, titling the screenplay Jackie Brown. Tarantino hesitated to discuss the changes with Leonard, finally speaking with Leonard as the film was about to start shooting. Leonard loved the screenplay, considering it not only the best of the 26 screen adaptations of his novels and short stories, but also stating that it was possibly the best screenplay he had ever written. That's interesting because I do wonder though that how like with the other books that Tarantino was considering to adapt, like how those would have looked like had he actually fulfilled those. I mean, I don't think we'll ever know because as I'm recording this, he has not announced his 10th movie yet, but he has said that with the 10th movie is going to be the final movie that he does as a director. So I guess we'll never know, but yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm not familiar with either of the books, but yeah, I found that's interesting to learn there. So Tarantino's screenplay followed closely to the novel, but incorporated elements of Tarantino's trademark humor and pacing. And the screenplay was influenced by black exploitation films, but Tarantino said Jackie Brown is not a black exploitation film. I would say, in the traditional sense, yeah, it's not a black exploitation film, but it does have, you could say, elements to it, so to speak. But yeah. And Jackie Brown alludes to Pam Grier's career in many ways. So the poster resembles, her previous films like Coffee and Foxy Brown, and includes quotes apparently from both films. The typeface for the film's opening titles were used in Foxy Brown, and some of the music, background music, was from the score of Coffee, as I've previously mentioned. And Tarantino, he wanted Pam Grier to play Jackie Brown. She previously read for the character Jodie in Pulp Fiction, but Tarantino didn't believe audiences would find her plausible for Eric Stoltz to yell at her. So apparently, Pam Grier did not expect Tarantino to contact her after Pulp Fiction. But she showed up to read for Jackie Brown. Apparently, Tarantino had posters of her films in his office. She asked if he put them there because she was coming to read for him, but he said that he was actually planning to take them down before her audition to avoid making look like he wanted to impress her. That's quite interesting. Also, too, Quentin Tarantino, he met Robert Forster in a restaurant and handed him the script saying, "You're going to do this, and that's all there is to it." So Forster was naturally thrilled, having had a major career slump at that point. And this film saw him come back in a big way, even landing an Oscar nomination, which I'm sure like it's deserved. I just wish, other people involved with the movie were nominated for this, but it is what it is. Pam Grier didn't expect her longtime friend Sid Haig to play the judge. If you remember the courtroom scene of the movie, she burst out laughing as she was surprised by Haig since they starred together in several exploitation films and all that stuff. I remember, yeah, in Foxy Brown, he did a cameo in that movie. I saw that recently with that movie, but yeah, that's quite interesting to learn. Also, too, Mira Sorvino, who at the time was dating Quentin Tarantino, can be seen out of focus in the back of the courtroom at Jackie's arraignment. And apparently, she receives a special thanks credit as Bert D'Angelo's daughter because she's Paul Sorvino's daughter. Interesting. I think I did mention briefly in the episode for Romy and Michelle's high school reunion that, yeah, she was dating Tarantino at the time, and there were some trademarks of his that were featured in that movie. Also, too, they say the scene when Max and Jackie talk, and Max discusses that he had work done on his hair to make him look younger. Apparently, was suggested by Robert Forster, as he had surgery when his hairline began to disappear and thought it would fit the character. Tarantino was delighted that Forster was willing to openly discuss the procedure and immediately wrote it into the screenplay. Interesting. So while Jackie Brown was in production, Universal was preparing to begin production on Steven Soderbergh's 1998 film Out of Sight, which is an adaptation of another Elmore Leonard 1996 book of the same name that features the character Ray Nicolette, played by Michael Keaton, and apparently waited to see whom Tarantino would cast as Nicolette for Jackie Brown. So Michael Keaton was hesitant to take the part of Ray Nicolette, even though Tarantino wanted him for it. So Keaton subsequently agreed to play Nicolette again in Out of Sight uncredited, appearing in one brief scene. Although the legal rights to the character were held by Tarantino Miramax, as Jackie Brown had been produced first, Tarantino insisted that the studio not charge Universal for using the character in Out of Sight, allowing the character's appearance without Miramax receiving financial compensation. That's interesting. I feel like that stuff is rare to see these days in movies, I guess because of copyrights and all that stuff. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen Out of Sight. I need to rewatch that movie. But I just remember at the time, yeah, like his character is interesting, like how his character is in that movie in comparison to Jackie Brown. Also, too, apparently Tarantino was criticized for excessive exploitative violence in preceding hits like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. So a sarcastic response to critics in this film was to tone down the blood and guts. When Melanie was shot by Lewis, we don't see anything, and when Ordell kills Lewis, we are behind the action, out of view of the bullet contact. That's interesting though, because I thought like it was more like because he wanted to change things up, but nope. Apparently, it's because of the criticism he had received before on that. But I guess that doesn't matter because with the movies he's done afterwards, have a lot of that stuff, and I'm sure people point out. But hey, and lastly, Spike Lee publicly criticized Tarantino for the frequent use of the N word in the movie. Samuel Jackson, who has worked with Spike Lee, defended Tarantino in the press. Harvey Weinstein, who was the Miramax chairman at the time, called Lee in an attempt to mediate between him and Tarantino, but Spike Lee refused to speak with Tarantino. Interesting. And I think, yeah, like with Tarantino's, use of the N-word in his movies has frequently come up in terms of being controversial and all of that stuff. So, yeah, there's that. All right. So, lastly, should this movie be rediscovered? And I say absolutely yes. I would say it's underrated amongst Tarantino's works, but I would put it high up there in terms of one of my favorite Tarantino movies. Honestly, that kind of changes in terms of what's my favorite Tarantino movie because I've seen all of his movies at this point. But yeah, it's high up there in terms of his filmography. Um, I don't know if he'll ever like adapt another person's work because he seems to focus on original stuff these days. But yeah, I really like this movie. The cast do a great job. And love how he explores like mature themes in this movie in regards to ageism and all that stuff. So there's that. Please check out the movie if you haven't done so already. All right, so that pretty much wraps up this episode, but also to season 5 of the podcast. Like, wow. Hi, hi, hi. But yes, we're all wrapped up here. So, you can find me on Instagram, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Linktree at Numpy Malloy. You can find the podcast on Instagram, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Linktree at RD Movies Pod. Visit buymeacoffee.com/RD Movies Pod to support the podcast via donation and to view exclusive posts there. Join the Rediscover Movies Hub, which is a community group on the official Wix website, which is rdmoviespod.wixsite.com/official, where you can interact with others, share thoughts on the podcast, and more. On Spotify, you can answer the future poll, rate the podcast, and leave a comment. You can leave a review and rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, and Podchaser. You can submit questions, comments, or suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com, or you can fill out the contact form on our link tree to be featured on a Q&A episode, which will air after the season 5 after show, which will air after this episode. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, the next episode is the season 5 after show, which I'll be sharing my thoughts on the season, and then after that episode will be the Q&A. So if you have questions for me, please send them my way. Any feedback, send them my way, and I'll looking forward to reading those. Also to catch up on the polls if you haven't done so already on Spotify and all that stuff. So yeah, there's that. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in for not just for this episode, but for the season. And I hope to catch you on the next one.